Hello, thanks for joining me. My name is Michael Hahn, and this is the Natural Area Preservation Controlled Burn presentation. This presentation is the same presentation that we give during our public meeting in the spring for our controlled burn season. This is just a recording, as you know, and but covers the same material. Like I said, my name is Michael Hahn, and I am one of the stewardship supervisors at the City of Ann Arbor's Natural Area Preservation. Our mission at NAP is to protect and restore Ann Arbor's natural areas and to foster an environmental ethic within the community. And we do that a lot of different ways. One of the ways to protect and restore Ann Arbor's natural areas is with the use of controlled fire. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the history of fire on the landscape in Southeast Michigan. We're going to talk about why fire is important and how our native species have adapted to it. We'll also touch on the steps that we take leading up to our controlled burn season, and some of the safety precautions and permitting that we go through. And then we'll talk about how we can minimize how we can minimize smoke impacts to the surrounding community. So to get started, we're gonna take a step back to your high school geography class, where we're learning about land surveys and sections in a land. So surveyors were going through the country in the early 1800s to mid 1800s, dividing the land up into smaller segments or sections, so they can start divvying out the land and start putting it up for sale or handing it out in some cases. So they were dividing townships into 36 square mile sections, so 1 square mile on all 4 sides, and each township has 36 sections. Whenever possible, at those intersections of these sections, surveyors would mark trees and the distance, the species, the distance of the tree, the angle from where that corner is, and the size of the tree, just so they could better reference, where the corner of that section is. And so here's an example or a diagram of a corner section here. And in each section, there's a distance, so 47 links to this fir tree that's 48 inches in diameter. This tree here is 67 links from this white pine tree that's 24 inches in diameter, and so forth. Now the links is just a distance of a unit of measurement that they used. Links were a smaller unit within a chain, and that was the standard for how they were measuring things. So I find this this map here quite interesting. In section 32, this is a map of a portion of Ann Arbor here, just to give you to help orient yourself a little bit. This is Scioto Church Road running east-west here, and then running north-south is State Street. Both of those roads are section lines for the township. And just to help orient you a little bit more, right in the middle here, right at the corner of Stadium and Main, that is the big house, and then on the southwest corner of that also where you would find Pioneer High School. So kind of interesting here, this is the actual notes from the surveyor from section 32 in Ann Arbor. And so it's a little tricky to read, but here you can see that they're entering a prairie at 10 chains. Um, they're leaving the same prairie at 35 chains, and that there are 40 chains at the midpoint. So these are all descriptions. Chains are, again, just a unit of measurement. Chains, I believe, are 66 feet long. And so this just gives them a distance to measure from here. Now here's the description of the trees from those corner posts. This is a bur oak that's 20 inches in diameter at breast height, and that's from the north. It is 38.5 degrees east and 179 links, or 118 feet from that corner. And as you go further down, you can see that the surveyor set the post corner to sections 31 and 32 on a bur oak, and that looks like it's to the north or maybe to the west. I'm not sure. I'm going to guess to the west, and that's about 107 feet away from that intersection. And then there's another bur oak tree that looks like it's about 20-inch DBH. That's to the north, and that's 182 feet away. So this just gives us an idea of how they used trees, or I guess this is an example of how they use trees on to help find section corners. Now, in this day and age, we have a lot of different digital mapping devices, and before we had that, here's a map that was hand drawn of all of the different pre-European settlement vegetation, and so this just gives an idea of what this area looks like. And you can see Ann Arbor, the town is highlighted here. We have a lot of light greens, which are, this is all black oak. Here in the yellow is oak barrens, and all this dark green here is white oak, black oak, and hickory. So within the Ann Arbor area, you can see there is a predominantly oak woodlands throughout here. And just a little bit north of town here, you can even see a very barren, brushy timber that's almost all burned. So an example of something that was documented of being burned. Here is a little older digital photo, or a digital map of same vegetation type within our natural areas and with our parks. You can see that the tan, which is the majority of the town, is mixed oak, and then a lot of the pink that covers throughout the map is oak hickory forest. Here, this is a photo, another map that again highlights the vegetation type here within southern Michigan, and actually I think if it was zoomed out, it would be the entire state. Again, the predominant color in Washtenaw County is that pink color, which is oak hickory forest. So a lot of oak hickory forest throughout Washtenaw County and in the Ann Arbor areas. And this right here is just one more example from the Michigan State University extension. And it's interesting how you'll notice the map on the left talks about the barrens, prairies, and savannas, and how predominant they were in the 1800s. Notice those green dots all throughout. And then if you look at current day, how few of those habitats are still left. And so just an example of how these natural communities are disappearing. And here's a zoomed in photo of it with the blue arrow pointing to the Ann Arbor area. Uh, this is what what it currently looks like now. So just a small fraction of what it used to be. Now, the maps will give you one thing, but the other thing that we have are some notes from surveyors and travelers from the 1800s when they were first coming here, when European settlers were first coming to the area, and gives us what I love about these quotes is they help paint a picture of what this looked like before Europeans came and changed the landscape. So I'm going to read these to you. The monotonous landscape ceases near Ann Arbor, and here the country becomes more interesting as one approaches the high plateau. The dense forests disappear and the lakes surrounded by the pretty hills and park-like woods, which the Americans call oak openings, meet the traveler's eye. And that's from Carl Neidhart. He's coming from Pleasant Lake to Ann Arbor, or Ann Arbor to Pleasant Lake in 1834. In all of these quotes, we have photos of habitat of what these travelers and people are seeing. So this gives you a better sense of these are pictures of areas of what Ann Arbor was looking like then. For the first few miles, we passed through the woods. Soon we reached the so-called oak openings, where the trees stand a few paces apart and where the ground was overgrown with luxurious grass. Passage is obstructed neither by bushes nor by fallen trees. In the italics there is something that we've added. Small knolls alternate with lovely little valleys. No park laid out by human hands could compare with this natural setting. Again, that's Carl Neidhart. At this season of the year, the country was beautiful beyond description. The plains were covered at intervals as far as the eye could reach, with wide-spreading forest trees, which gave it the appearance of an immense park. And the earth was covered with a rich carpet of beautifully variegated wildflowers and grapes. And this is from J.W. Wing, referencing, and he's in Scioto Township here near Dexter. So as you listen, as you've heard these quotes, it really helps to give you a sense of what these people are seeing. It really paints this picture really nicely. In specifically here, you can see that J.W. Wing is talking about the wide-spreading forest trees. In here, you can see even the logos of the City of Ann Arbor, the Natural Area Preservation logo, and our Parks and Recreation tree are all trees with wide spreading branches. Just a few more here. 6 miles west of Plymouth, we left the heavy timber, meaning the thick woods, and passed into a sandy soil with light oak wood. So the trees start to spread out a little bit more. Trees grow at intervals of 30 feet and have a young undergrowth just springing up, which is burnt down every year. That's from J.M. Gordon in 1836. In this photo here, you can see that this picture has a fire scar, is a tree with a fire scar on it. Oaks of the circumference of 9 to 15 feet abound in the forests in the country between Dixboro and Ann Arbor. The circumference of 9 to 15 feet, so those diameters are 3 to 5 feet, trees that are 3 to 5 feet in diameter. So to the point where you couldn't wrap your arms all the way around them. A little rolling for the first few miles, and then the oak openings began. white oak and bur oak at intervals of 30 to 40 feet, with an undergrowth 5 to 6 feet high, which has the appearance of being annually burnt down, as I'm informed it is. That was J.M. Gordon again. The scene was beautiful beyond description. The timber consisted of large oak trees standing several rods apart. Rods are another unit of measurement, which tied into chains and links. So oak trees standing several rods apart. In the intermediate space between them was covered with bright green grass and beautiful flowers. The whole country had been burnt over every fall or spring, I presume for centuries, and everything had been destroyed except these giants of the forest. It did appear as if one half of the vegetation was flowers. Most of them were about 18 inches high, and when moved by the wind, the effect was wonderful. I have never seen in any of our large cities a park that was its equal. Here's the last one. The singular and interesting appearance of the country in its alternating groves and fields and timberlands, it is a subject of inquiry with this speculative mind. To me, it has the appearance of a highly improved district. So far as my observations and inquiries have extended, they support the hypothesis that the fire annually communicated by the Indians for the purpose of hunting has produced the present prairies, plains, and openings that diversify the whole face of the country. And that's from a letter from Ann Arbor by a traveler from Canada in 1829. So why did Native Americans, why do Native Americans use fire? Historically, it was used for warfare. You could use it to push people that you're fighting away. You could use it as a weapon, or in the same sense, you could remove that fuel so it couldn't be used as a weapon for on you. It also they also used it or use it for clearing land. Just making the area more usable and more comfortable. It is harder to see maybe your enemies or the quarry that you're hunting, in thicker uncleared land. It's also used for selecting for desired species or creating habitat for game. So if Native Americans are using certain plants for making tools or for making different products that they're using, this would help with that. They may use it for hunting, so pushing game to one direction, or for making it easier to see the game. Is also used for pest management. I know myself that the worst thing in the world is finding a bunch of ticks on me, and I'm sure that the smoke helped with pushing pests away as well. And so here's a graph of just showing the impacts of how long-term prescribed burns affect tick abundance. Here you can see these are unburned areas, and these are unburned areas with tick populations. And then right down here at the bottom, you can see after controlled burns, the tick populations have gone down significantly. Culturally, fire is something that we as humans, as a species, have used for well, for as long as we've known. And you know, even scientists will say that we are the fire species. There are no other species that are using fire. So why do we, natural area preservation, use fire? One is there is an increase in tick-borne illnesses, and they are on the rise. You can see here from the early 1990s to almost current or 2017. Every year, the annual report of Lyme disease cases is increasing. Controlled burns help, as you saw in the earlier graph, help to keep tick populations down. We we use controlled fire to discourage woody vegetation growing up in our historically open woodlands and prairies. We use fire to eliminate thatch and blacken the soil, which may help to heat up the soil sooner, help the plants to grow, start growing sooner. We even see that it stimulates native plants. Now, I'm not sure if that's from the added nutrients added from the ash from the fire, or if it's just from the physical effects of the heat or what, but it absolutely stimulates native plants. And here's a picture of the alternative. So I would say that this picture here does not describe what settlers saw coming through here. This particular picture is taken at Bandimere Nature Area, and this is predominantly buckthorn. So here is a photo taken from one of our photo monitors, or from one of our photo monitoring points at Furstenberg Nature Area in 1995. And you can see that this is just not that inviting of a place. That's not somewhere where I'm gonna be that interested in spending a lot of time. But as you can see here, in 2008, we have cleared the area with mechanical controls, with the use of herbicides, and then absolutely with the use of fire to help open this space back up. And you can see here, this is cutting brush with a brush cutter is one way to clear shrubs. It's a lot more labor intensive, and it does require the use of herbicides to kill that plant. But if you look at controlled fire, it's a more historically accurate way to clear shrubs. Now, I do want to point out that controlled fire and cutting brush and the using herbicides is all part of our integrated pest management. They all have their place, but historically, shrubs were controlled and underbrush was controlled from the use of fire. Now, this photo right here in particular was, we were working with a researcher to look at the effects of how controlled fire had, what I believe on brush. And if anything, it has some really nice before and after effects of helping to understand how it's controlling brush. So the burn was done on April 1 in 96, and 19 days after the burn, you can really see that the left side of the screen where we did the burn doesn't look too different than the right side of the screen. But if you fast forward 5 weeks, you can see a significant difference on the impacts that it had on those invasive plants and on the brush in general on the ground. You can even go look at the same spot 3.5 years later, post-burn, and you can still see the effects of that controlled burn on the left-hand side of the screen. Now, this is, I believe, this is pretty close to the same area, and from 1999 to 2007, it is significantly different. And that's because we went through and we cleared all of the brush out of there now, definitely giving this more open-like appearance that was described in some of those quotes from earlier today. You can see even closer to just a couple years ago, there is even less brush and very much a park-like setting that was described. Fire stimulates native wildflowers. They're early on in the Knapp days. Now, this is a story I'm sharing that secondhand at this point, but I think I've got the point of it, or the main details of the story down. Early days in Knapp, we had botanists on staff, and everybody had agreed that controlled fire in prairies was the way to go. But our botanist on staff at that point, she wasn't too sure about woodland burns and how that would be beneficial to our woods. And to be quite honest, was quite skeptical of it. Well, we did one burn through, I think this was at Mary Beth Doyle Nature Area, and a couple weeks after the burn, she called up the manager at the time and said, "Oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe the amount of trout lily that are coming up here. I've never seen so many trout lily here before." And a couple weeks later, she came out, same thing. "Oh, the amount of trillium out here is fantastic. We've never had this much trillium out here." The same thing for geranium. It just every couple weeks as the spring went on and the progression of wildflowers came up, she had just talked about, "Oh, the geranium and the Solomon seal out here. It's more than we've ever seen." And at that point is when our botanist was sold on the fact that fire is beneficial not only for prairies, but also for our woodlands and for our savannas and our oak openings here in our city parks. So it stimulates wildflowers. It may also help to control invasive species. There are studies out there of looking at the effects of fire on garlic mustard and fire on buckthorn. My understanding is that fire will push back young garlic mustard rosettes, so the first year plants and the young seedlings, pretty well. It may not affect the second year plants and the more mature plants. You can see here it top killed, or on the left-hand side of the photo, you can see the buckthorn there. That tall tree was killed, but it only top killed the plant. You can see the buckthorn is starting to resprout. And that's where I think the importance of other mechanical controls or other management techniques come into play, to where they can complement our controlled fire. Now, back in the first, I think this was during our first burn season here at the city of Ann Arbor, we worked with researchers to look at controlled burns and how they affect plants or vegetation. So burn took place in, looks like in 94 and also in 96. The first burn, this was actually the day before our first burn. You can see we essentially made a line and burned one side and didn't burn the other. Here's when the burn was happening. We stopped it right at the flags there. And a couple weeks after, 2 weeks after the burn, there was not a significant change visually from one side to the other. 9 weeks after the burn, though, really you can't even see the difference from where we burned and where we didn't. And some of the research, though, shows that from the autumn biomass in the burn in 1996, there was significantly more biomass in the burned area compared to the unburned area. Also, after the fire in April of 96, there was much more abundant species diversity or species richness in the burned area of that wet prairie. Now, Cedar Bend Nature Area is the oldest nature area, and that's a part of the city parks. And here's some photos from the early 1990s. Here you can see this is quite an open landscape, and really all of those flowers in there are bloodroot, that's the most bloodroot I think I have ever seen. And if I saw that in person, it would be quite the sight. This is the historic hairpin turn in Cedar Bend Nature Area, something that is even to this day you can't miss this spot. And so in the early 1990s, in the early 1900s, you can see into the park, get a sense of what it looks like. Fairly open, trees are pretty young at this point. But maybe 70 years later, maybe 100 years later, the difference in that hairpin turn, though, is quite significant. Look at the amount of brush in there. You can't see anything in front of you. Definitely a spot that I'm not going to want to hang out and spend time in. But with some mechanical removals, with some brush cutting, and with the regular use of controlled fire, you can see there is a significant change in that area. And even to this day, you can still see that area is pretty, at the hairpin turn, is pretty far open and much closer to what was described by the settlers as they were coming here in the early to mid 1800s. So the other thing that we had found, that upland boneset was a species that was originally not documented in Cedar Bend Nature Area until after our first controlled burn at Cedar Bend, and which you may not, this one plant may not seem significant, but that plant had not been identified, I believe, in Washtenaw County since 1937. So there is a big difference there between that's a significance. That's pretty significant to have that species not seen in maybe about 70 years, almost 60 years, and to have it come back now. And that just speaks to the power of and how important fire is to the plant community. Excuse me. And fire is not only beneficial to plant species, it's also beneficial to pollinators like the sweat bee, other bees. And really, you might be asking yourself, what about wildlife in general? For the most part, we are not finding big impacts on wildlife with our controlled burns. This toad here was in our burn unit and hopped away just fine. What you may be thinking is that fire is going to come through. It's going to be just this wall. It's going to consume everything that in its path. And in reality, there are some low spots. There's thatch that these animals can get under and through, or even holes in the ground that they use to get away from the fire. Now, that's not to say that we we definitely find uh, frogs and reptiles that do get pinched by fire at times, but it is significantly less than what we think. And as burn managers, if we start to see a lot of wildlife on the landscape, snakes or toads and frogs moving around the landscape, we definitely change have will change our ignition patterns to help reduce impacts on wildlife. So it's something that we do take into consideration when we're doing our controlled burns. We also find that our burns, because of the increase in the amount of plants, stem counts, or in the amount of flowers that each plant is putting out, we do find that it is overall beneficial to pollinators like monarchs, compared to maybe the couple of eggs that we may burn up early in the season. So a lot of what we've been talking about is these are the things that these are our observations. These are the things that are happening in our parks. But here's some information from the Michigan Natural Features Inventory that talks about prairies and savannas in Michigan and some of the restoration and management of that. Ultimately, what MNFI is saying is that these ecosystems are in peril. They are they are highly diverse plant and animal communities, but there's only 1% of remaining prairies left or even not even a percentage, a fraction of the percentage of savannas remaining. And I'm not sure if that statement is actually for Michigan or if it's for the Midwest or where that is. But just to look at, just to give you perspective, that would only be 2,400 acres out of 12 million acres. So quite the significance in decrease in these ecosystems. These highly diverse ecosystems are rare, and the species in them are declining. So I want to talk about how burns are conducted. To start, there is a whole planning and inventory stage where we're going out into our parks, and we're looking for specific areas and management units within our parks that would benefit from a controlled burn. We're not coming through and we're not just burning the entire park. We are looking for particular areas that would benefit from our controlled burn. And what we're looking for are an increase in maybe woody invasive plants, areas that look like they would benefit from that. We're also writing our burn prescriptions or our plans. This is where we're identifying where we're going to burn, how we're going to burn. Here's where all of our equipment is. This is the fire jurisdiction that we're working with. Here's our permit from the fire marshal, and all of the equipment that we have. It's one document that outlines everything that one would need on a controlled burn. We're also starting to put out signs. We are signing the trailheads of the parks that are where we'll be conducting controlled burns. We're hosting trainings, and that's because we have volunteers help us on our controlled burn teams. So between volunteers and new staff, We're training them in the early spring, getting them ready for our controlled burns. We're even doing some small burns, showing people, excuse me, what these fires are going to look like, and how to use equipment, and all that's all part of our trainings. Our teams are going out in the field and they're doing site prep, and that may be putting in burn breaks, that may be putting up flagging to help with communication. Our burn breaks just help us to keep the fire within the units of where we're going to be doing our performing our burns. Here we're even blowing around logs that or stumps, for this matter, that we wouldn't want to catch on fire because maybe they have a big hollow spot in them, or that they're going to create large amounts of smoke beyond what we would want. We're even keeping track of the weather, just getting ready. Controlled fire is a very weather dependent activity, and so we are watching the fire, looking for the optimal conditions for us to be able to put fire on the ground. Here you can see that we're even taking a wind measurement in this photo. Now, the number of days we've burned, or the dates that we historically are burning, you can see our burn seasons typically they start at the end of February and they go towards the end of May. But you can see that the main part of our season in the spring is from mid-March to about the end of April. That's going to be the predominant busiest time of our year most of the time. If you'll notice the graph, there's a big difference though between our spring burn season and our fall burn season. So our fall burn season is the season is going to be the beginning or mid-August until the end of December, or sometime towards the end of December. But you can see there's far less, there are significantly less amount of burn days in the fall. And that's just because as conditions start to get better, as the leaves fall down and they start to dry out, we're losing day length, and the seasons are starting to transition. And so we just don't have enough light at the end of the day when fuels are finally dry enough. We have all of our equipment and our safety gear ready to go. These little silver torches in the middle, these are our burn torches. That's what we use to help conduct our fire. You can see, or to put fire on the ground. You can see our water tanks down here behind everything. We have water pumps, we have fuel cans, chainsaws if we need them, all different types, all the equipment that we'll need to conduct a safe, controlled burn. Here's a picture of our burn trailer. Oh man, back when it was shiny and still looking fresh. It looks a little more tired these days. We even have photo monitors going out and taking before and after photos of our controlled burns, just so we can get a sense of what's actually happening out there. So here we're prepping more equipment, getting ready for that first burn. We're even doing some public relations. This burn in particular is an educational burn we do. Typically, I think historically, it's always been at Burr Park and some of the wet meadows out there. But helping people understand and learn about why controlled fire is important to the land that we do. So just before we start our burns, we'll do a briefing and everybody gets on the same page on the day of a controlled burn. We're even putting signs up to help passerbyers know what's going on, and that, you know, this smoke is intentional. Um, we may even do a smoke check. So we've looked at the weather, we know which way it's been forecasted to go. Is this smoke going to go actually the way that we want it to? And then we conduct our controlled burn here. We'll start with keeping fire on our burn breaks, making sure that it's not going outside of them. And we'll make sure that everything stays where we want it to. And once we've gotten fire around, we'll ring the fire or come pretty close to creating a ring. And sometimes in the prairies, the flames can get relatively tall, but it's all okay because it's all contained within the unit. The idea of a controlled fire is that you light the perimeters, and we use the wind and fuels to pull the fire into the middle. So if everything goes the way you want it to, and it typically does, the fire ends up meeting itself in the middle and burning up all the fuel and putting itself out. Actually, watching fire come together at the end, it's almost like the crescendo of a music piece. It really is quite fantastic to watch. And afterwards, we're doing 100% mop up. We're making sure that all limbs, all everything that's smoking is put out. So any branches and any downed logs, anything smoldering, we don't leave the site until it is 100% cold. We'll use mop up. Mopping up is the term used for putting out the fire. We'll use water, like in this photo. We'll even use various different types of tools to to help with mopping up. So once the fire is done, we do put up what happened here signs, and it just helps people to understand that this was intentional. This is what had happened. This is what it's going to look like right after the burn, and within a couple weeks, it'll be back to what everybody expects. Sometimes even after a controlled burn, we'll go out and this is a great time to put down a native seed or to sow seed. Pardon me. To sow seed so we can get the best seed to soil contact for that seed and the best germination of it. So how do we minimize smoke? Because smoke is definitely one of the biggest things, biggest issues that we have with controlled burns. And we take our smoke extremely seriously to make sure that we're not impacting, or we're impacting as few people as we can. So in general, our tall grass prairies and our oak hickory hardwoods produce a smaller amount of smoke with tons regarding tons per acre. And the one thing to keep in mind is that this graph is considering the consumption of all of the limbs and all of the trees within this burn, and so sorry. And actually, when we're doing our controlled burns, we're only burning off the vegetation itself, and we're only burning off the light fuels. And so from this graph, we're actually burning, we're even putting less tons per acre of smoke up in the atmosphere. Another way that we minimize smoke impact from impacting people is reducing the size of our burn units. We're not typically burning across the entire park. We'll make them smaller, especially if our smoke is going to impact more than more than what we anticipated originally. So we'll make adjustments to those burn units if necessary. We do perform our burns mostly during the dormant season. We are experimenting with some summer burns over the last couple of years, and we're looking for to do that to help benefit pollinators, to reduce some of the grasses. So adjusting the time of year with our burns helps with species diversity, but for the most part, we're burning during the dormant season when our smoke tends to burn a little bit cleaner. We burn when fuels are dry. Dry fuels just help to burn hotter and to do a better job of consuming all of the fuels. We avoid igniting heavy fuels, so large trees, hollow trees, big deadfalls that are down on the ground. We do our best to keep all of those cold, so we're not putting unnecessary amounts of smoke up into the atmosphere. And at the chance that some of those larger fuels do catch on fire, we do our best to put them out as quickly as possible to minimize the amount of smoke that they do put out. We burn to maximize efficiency, so we're gonna burn on days that it's gonna burn the best. And like I mentioned earlier, we do 100% complete mop-up, so making sure everything is cold before we leave, including snags that may catch on fire and may be burning on the inside. And then how do we minimize the impacts of smoke to citizens? We burn when atmospheric conditions are optimal for maximizing lift and dispersion. So we're burning on days when smoke is going to get up and out, and it's windy enough that it's not just going to linger and just sit, and we'll just be sucking that in all time. On those windier days, the wind helps to disperse and break up that smoke a lot quicker. We also use a modeling program called V-Smoke, and this helps us get a better idea of where our smoke is going to go and how far is some of that heavier, dense smoke going to go compared to some of the lighter smoke. For the most part, this yellow line, we consider this almost like campfire-like smoke, or even less. And then as you get to these really darker red colors and almost purple colors, that's where your heaviest smoke is going to be. So we use this modeling program to help tell us where our smoke is going to go and who is it going to impact. Here we're putting smoke over the we're putting smoke over mostly over the river and impacting very few people. Just to give you an idea, we would never do a controlled burn at Furstenberg Nature Area with a south wind, because we would be putting fire right on here on High School, we were putting smoke right on here on High School, and even putting heavy dense smoke on Fuller Road. Same thing with the hospital, the VA hospital and the U of M hospital that's not that far away. We would never burn with an east wind because there's potential for putting smoke on those smoke sensitive areas. And just like I said, we blow smoke away from smoke sensitive areas. This I believe is Lakewood School. We notify the public. We're putting signs up in the park, like I mentioned earlier. We are sending out mailings. To our adjacent neighbors, and depending on the size of the burn, that will help dictate how far our mailings are. Our mailings go out, but this red area on this map here are the burn units that we have, and all of the yellow outlined areas are the neighbors that we mailed for this controlled burn. So the question you'd be asking yourself is, well, where are you guys going to be burning this year or this season? And I think the best spot and the most current up-to-date information that you could find is going to be on our website. So if you go to a2gov.org/NAP, and if you just click on the controlled burn tab here, that will pull up our controlled burn page, and it will give the most current season's parks that will be conducting controlled burns in for that season. Now, we aren't the only folks that are conducting controlled burns in the city. There are contractors that maybe businesses or private residents have hired to do controlled burns. There's even you have even seen rain gardens throughout the park, or excuse me, throughout the city, and a lot of those rain gardens, or at least the ones that are managed by our stormwater office and by the Washtenaw County Water Resources Commissioner's office, will have controlled burns, and so the rain gardens are shaped to capture water. And the idea is that it slows water down from going down into our storm system, and allows more water to be absorbed into the ground, so it reduces stress on our storm system. And a lot of these rain gardens mostly have native plants, and so they benefit from controlled fire, much like our natural areas do. And the rain garden controlled burns happen every 2 to 3 years. And just for context, there's 150 public rain gardens within the city. And this map right here just shows the city of Ann Arbor owned public rain gardens. These would be the ones that I believe will be being burned by contractors that are working with the Water Resources Commissioner's office. So if you have questions about any controlled burns that are happening in rain gardens, you can reach out to Katie Wytichek, and she is the water quality specialist at the Water Resources Commissioner's office. And here's Katie's information if you have more questions about that. I believe that you could reach out to Katie too, and she would let you know which pardon me, which rain gardens are going to be burned for this particular season. When I recorded this in July, she hadn't quite had those parks identified, or those rain gardens identified yet. So I wanted to end our presentation today with one last quote. This is one of my favorites. The next day we left for Ann Arbor. We were delighted with the country before us. It was beautiful in its natural state, and I have sometimes thought that cultivation marred its loveliness. That's all I have for you today. I hope that you learned a little bit more about the importance of controlled burns and how it was historically on our landscape. And as stewards of the land, it's our job to keep our natural areas healthy and open and safe. And I think that our controlled burns, when done the way that we do them safely, they they help us to keep the history and the of controlled fire on our land. If you have questions, you have concerns about our controlled burn program, I'd love for you to reach out to me. My name is Michael Hahn, and you can reach out to NAP at a2gov.org. And like I mentioned earlier, if you want more information, we have a ton of information on our website, which is a2gov.org/NAP. We depend on volunteers in all the work that we do. So if you want to come out and you want to do controlled burns with us, reach out to us. We'd love to get you signed up for our training in the following spring. And a lot of the photos that you saw today come from our photo monitoring program. And so we take volunteers. We have volunteers helping us out with photo monitoring, and we'd love to have you there. Not to mention all different types of ways to be engaged in our natural areas through doing some inventorying stuff and from participating in work days. But thanks for your time, and I hope you reach out if you have any questions. Thanks.